Lynn Claire Dennis gave me an unusual confirmation of the fundamental pattern. She passed out from lack of oxygen in a hot air balloon race over the Alps and was pronounced dead at the hospital. She later revived and felt compelled to draw what she'd seen in her near-death state. Though she had no scientific training, the mathematical accuracy of her intuitive drawings has been verified by numerous scientists around the world.
I came to the end of a tunnel, which music had drawn me through. And I saw what I call the strand of the tapestry, weaving all creation. But it's music, it's light, it's what matter is, it's how matter moves, and it's love. It's a torus. It's a toroidal field. It maps how energy moves in a natural system. It's like the dynamics of our own DNA. It's like a cell. It's like a hurricane. We need to understand how space is organized, how matter organizes, because we have to re-inform ourselves in order to rebuild a new dynamic architecture that allows for our evolution, that stops the fighting and the fear that's going on.
Now, we've been considering a single torus here. One of the wonderful things about a torus is that it's open at the center. And being open at the center, it can connect with the entire universe. And that means another torus can be right here beside it. And center to center, there's no problem, torus to torus, to connect. So, you and I, center to center, very distinct, different beings, but center to center, through consciousness, we intimately can connect. And that's the same, we can connect with the entire universe.
The inner workings of an atom are one of the great mysteries of current science. It's generally believed an atom is made of billiard ball-like particles. Dr. Patrick Flanagan is a physician, physicist, and inventor. His theoretical modeling of the electron suggests an atom is actually made of torus whirlpools in a sea of energy.
The donuts were spinning in such a way that energy was exiting at the equator and energy was coming in through the poles, and the proton had the exact reverse. So now a neutron would be a combination of an electron and a proton coupled together.
Kotodama, a Japanese spiritual tradition that has spanned thousands of years, was the practice in which Morihei Ueshiba, the founder of Aikido, was trained. Kotodama means knowing the vibration of the universe. Aikido instructor Jack Wada showed me the torus nature of the Kotodama chant, their core practice of tuning one's consciousness.
Kotodama, the two words in Chinese characters in Japanese, koto is like a word, and tama is like soul or spirit. And so kotodama can be kind of the spirit or the soul of the universe expressed in sound. And O-sensei said that these sounds generated, activated, and sustained what he called creation. In other words, I think he was looking past the obvious physical universe into almost like an energy blueprint for creation.
The same financial cartel are the most influential people in the establishment of the United Nations, which is being offered to the people of the world as a means of preserving the peace and protecting the interest of the common man. The same kind of a charade is going on there. Remember that the United Nations land was donated by the Rockefellers. Why did they do that? Why did the Rockefellers donate land, for example, to a Sloan Kettering Institute in New York, and then put 3 of their men on the board of directors? Why did they donate money for this great institution and that one, and then load up the board of directors with their people. Why do they do that? It's because they want something. But it's not something that the average person is going to learn about by reading the newspapers. So the United Nations is a creation of these same people that created the Federal Reserve System.
One of the metaphors I do use, however, is watershed, because we can understand what a healthy watershed is. It absorbs water quickly and releases it slowly. So even in the hottest day of summer, the stream is running, there's green, there's greenery, there's birds, there's insects, there's deer, what have you in that watershed. A sick watershed absorbs water very slowly and releases it very quickly. And so you get quick runoff, and you get flash floods and red water, and then there's no water there. It dries out, and it is inimical to diversity of life. What we see in the way we have organized our economy is that we are taking towns and regions and villages and cities and making them sick economic watersheds with our big box retailers, with our fast food outlets, and our gas stations. Essentially, you can drive through towns and eat, buy, fuel up, and all that money is in London that night. Nothing really stays in the community. It's a one-way street out. What comes in goes out right away. And they feel and see the impoverishment, what it does to schools, and what it does to their children, what it does to the housing stock, what it does to self-esteem. And what they don't realize is it's like somebody has slit their wrist and put it in warm water, and they wonder why they feel weak and anemic, you know. So part of what natural capitalism can be about is restoring these economic watersheds to be healthy ones. The food has to come from closer by, has to be local. The energy has to be locally generated. The housing and the building and the people who do the building have to be locally generated. The green buildings have to come in so that the buildings themselves aren't leaking money out into the world. We have globalized communications, but we haven't globalized opportunity. And so people are seeing this, and they're getting angry. They're getting resentful. They're getting mad. And unless we address this gap, we're going to create a polarized, divisive world in which more and more young men will go to madrasas to learn techniques to bring down the system.
The economists use a pie for their model, and my cake, the icing is the private sector. And we all like to work in the private sector. That's where all the innovation and the fun is. But the private sector rests on the public sector, which is all the tax-supported activities we have to have to keep the air and water clean, and the roads and schools and national defense and what have you. But that's where the economic model stops, because those two top layers are conducted in cash, and therefore the economists notice them and add them up in the GDP. But there are these two underneath layers which actually support the official cash measured economy. And the third layer down is the love economy. That's the 50% of all of the activities that support the economy without getting paid. And of course, the whole thing rests on Mother Nature's productivity. We realized that those economic textbooks that are operating the system right now are completely out of date. It's like a faulty economic source code, which is on all of our hard drives in our minds and in our institutions. For example, the way GNP looks at per capita income, averaging per capita income, that means that you could have a country where you had 20 billionaires and everybody else was homeless. But on average, it would look okay.
There's no more illuminating time about how the media functions than in the lead up to the invasion of Iraq. The networks, the main corporate newspapers, all beat the drums for war. Whether it was the New York Times or the Washington Post, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, CNN. It's easy to attack Fox, and they should be criticized fiercely. But all of them together did it. Day after day, this relentless drumbeat The media acting as a megaphone for those in power. We are not supposed to be an extension of the government. We're not supposed to be the amplifier of the government point of view. We're supposed to be holding those in power accountable. That's why independent media is so important. Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, a media watch group, did a study in the lead up to the invasion. They looked at the 4 major nightly newscasts, NBC, CBS, ABC, and PBS NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. There were 393 interviews done around war. This was right around Colin Powell, then Secretary of State, giving his push for war at the UN. The 2-week period, critical period, when the media is, as Noam Chomsky says, manufacturing consent for war. 393 interviews done around war on the 4 major nightly newscasts. Only 3 were with anti-war leaders, 3 of almost 400. It's astounding how many people in this country were opposed to the invasion, given how little that point of view was expressed.
Human rights are either born with you or they're given to you after you're born. In other words, they're either intrinsic, they come with you, or they're extrinsic, they're added afterwards. Now, collectivists believe that rights are added to the human being after they're born, and they're given by the state. All of the founding documents of collectivist regimes, whether it's the Constitution of the Soviet Union or the United Nations Draft Declaration on Human Rights, all of them state clearly that rights are granted by the state. Anybody who would read the UN documents with just as much care as they would read a used car sales contract, they would never sign on to the system. For example, the covenant, the draft covenant for human rights, for example, they list all of these wonderful privileges and rights which all mankind is going to have under the UN. Well, you say, what's wrong with that? Plenty wrong with that, because if the state has the power to grant them, it also has the power to take them away. And that's not something that I think most people would sign on to if they thought it through. Individualists believe that human rights are hardwired with the individual. And what more can you say? Certain rights are inalienable, as it says in the United States Declaration of Independence. Inalienable rights. And the purpose of government, it said, is to secure those rights, not to grant them, but to secure them against what? Against government in most cases. Who takes away rights in the real world? Individuals do, yes. Thieves, crooks, murderers, so forth. But they're nothing compared to the quantity of violations of human rights that are done by governments. It used to be that freedom was threatened by invading armies and force of arms. Foreign conquerors would come in, and they, at the point of a bayonet, they would enslave a population and take their freedom. That's not the way it's done today. If they can control what a person is allowed to earn or the purchasing power of the money that they have, if they can control that, they can control that person in the long run and in a way that most people don't even realize that they're being controlled. They won't step out of line for fear they'll lose their job. They won't get that money. They'll follow whatever is necessary to keep the income coming, and so they become easily enslaved. I've seen a lot of very brave men who in their lifetime have been in wars, and they have stepped forward, and they have faced an enemy, and they've risked their lives in physical combat in a kind of bravery that makes me wonder, could I do that if I were in that same situation? And they have. But then they come back to civilian life, and they get locked into the corporate world, and they're told, well, you shouldn't do this because it's going to be bad for your career, or you shouldn't speak out against this political movement over here because you'll be controversial, and their bravery disappears because it's a whole different battlefield, you see.
You're seeing the construction of a seamless web of repression from Oakland to Baghdad. And we understand that locking down urban America is a part of locking down all of U.S. society and an agenda beyond that. But what we also know is that the critical vulnerability in those kinds of plans is the human heart. Human beings have to carry out all these orders. human beings have to live at the effect of all these orders. And whenever you have that human factor, there's hope.
It's too late for the concept of sustainability, candidly. We're now into the phase called reconstruction. If we sustain what we've already done to this planet environmentally, it's not going to be inhabitable within a few more generations. So we have to go past sustainability to restoration. Obviously that implies environmentally, but I would say it also implies all the subsystems of human living as well. My number one value, as everyone knows who knows me, is integrity, both personal integrity and corporate integrity. So I would define integrity as living the truth you know. I call the difference between the truth you live and the truth you know, I call that pain. The pain in your personal life can come back as addictions, abusive personal relationships, lack of complete success in many different aspects of your life, or all of them. In the corporate world, that pain, I believe, is exhibited in the form of damage done to human beings. To be in integrity as a lawyer, it can't be about what I can get away with. It's got to be more about what does society need that I can help with, and how do I do that consistent with my oath, consistent with my responsibility to my clients, consistent with my responsibility to the broader society. Not easy answers, not easy questions, but that's where you have to go when you ask the question about integrity in business. I always leave this question with people in business. I say, don't tell me what you'd like to do or where you'd like to be 5 years out. Tell me what you think would be appropriate. So to answer what's appropriate, you start asking these fundamental questions about yourself and life, and you begin to ask them on the collective level about your corporate enterprise. Pretty soon, growth for growth's sake disappears, and you're now asking questions like, what's appropriate, what should we do, and why should we do it? I'm not a proponent of small is beautiful. I'm a proponent that appropriate is beautiful.
In the same way that the torus is both distinct and unified, in human terms we are all simultaneously both distinct individuals and one human family. Philosopher Ashok Gangadeen explains how this can be.
So imagine the core space of where we process our experience. And remember, all of our worldviews are in this space. We feel lonely and isolated and often impotent, so we're locked in. And our different worldviews compete for that space, for dominance. And so there's a lot of violence, chronic violence, and breakdown of relationships.
Ashok found the torus to be the first accurate scientific model that shows how each of us is a distinct individual, but also completely interconnected with all existence.
That this is already surrounded in the space of deep interconnectivity, of infinite boundless, Indra's net, the logosphere, whatever name, with a holistic field of deep interconnectivity where there are no more separated objects, but dynamic, toroidal, interconnected, fractal fields of energy, that we are already always surrounded. We ourselves right here, right now, always in this logosphere, or this field of interconnectivity. So that you and I, in our conversation, our dialogue, are not separate objects cut off but dynamic interconnected fields. And this is where knowledge and science and compassion and human relations and love all can take place. And this has been the cumulative teaching of all of our teachings for the centuries. And that's where we're suggesting that humanity must move and expand and mature for survival and thrival.
What gives me hope in spite of this repressive system is that I see the green shoots of human possibility coming up everywhere in Huntington, West Virginia, where no one ever ate off a tablecloth, or in Palo Alto. I mean, people are taking back the direction of their own lives, and what, after all, do you have? It's to write your own script it's just the highest. It's got to be the highest goal of a human life, writing your own script.
There has to be an answer to corporate globalization, and that's grassroots globalization. And there's nothing more important than that, than communication. That is the great equalizing force. We need an internet that everyone has access to, so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you're confronting a problem, because you see how people do it around the globe, and so often they're dealing with the same thing. The way the corporations have profited from globalization is precisely by having people at the grassroots not being able to communicate with each other, so you don't see the same thing a company is doing in one place in another place, so that people band together.
What I think causes unresolved conflict, the little tiny huge thing that causes it, is the inability to make this move, where you go from blame, it's their fault, to what's my contribution to that situation? If there's one little skill we need to really polish up on this planet, it's that one. Because when people go this way, they often do it out of blame, which is just as ineffective as blaming somebody else. So it's his fault or it's my fault is totally irrelevant. You know, it's all about, what did I do to bring this conflict into being? In a very fundamental way, Aikido and intimacy are totally the same thing, because when two people get together, energy rises. Energy becomes more than it was when they were on their own. And then if they blend and flow with that, then they get to go into that zone of co-creativity. But if they stop that flow at any given point, that energy turns into the energy of conflict. And that, to me, is really the art of intimacy, is learning to ride higher and higher waves of positive energy. Our view of integrity, very specific things. Number one, feeling your feelings, being present with your feelings, because if I'm sad and I don't know I'm sad, or I'm saying nothing's wrong, then I'm out of harmony here. And integrity comes from that Greek word that means wholeness. And so to be out of wholeness inside, it's kind of like having one wheel out of alignment. You get a shimmy that, affects the whole being. So number one, feeling your feelings. Number two, speaking authentically, so that any vibration I feel in here gets voiced. The third element has to do with keeping agreements. If I say something I'm going to do it. If I say something I'm not going to do, not doing it. That puts us into harmony with the universe. The fourth element is the graceful taking of responsibility, not as blame, not as burden, but as celebration. So when those four elements are working in harmony together, that's integrity.
A discovery that's made an enormous difference for us, and that we've shared with lots of people, is that relationships thrive when both people are aware that each person needs times of closeness, what we call the urge to merge, and times of individuation, where I'm having a direct experience of the world that doesn't go through anyone else. I feel my connection with the universe directly, and I get information from my inside and information from the universe, and then I share that in my relationship. And that dance of closeness and separateness is what renews a relationship. If people learn how to recognize the signals that I want to get close and the signals that I want to get separate. And that's a dance really worth learning.
Since the people who don't have the worldview of what's emergent are failing to solve any of our problems, that failure is meaningful. We have to fail because the system is unjust and unsustainable. So the failure of the system is necessary to create the new. And I think this function of synergy and cooperation accelerated, along with personal, individual co-creativity, could do it quickly, and it feels good. And everything else feels terrible. That's a sign too. Synergy is a way of very advanced form of communication and cooperation. It's not just being nice to each other or getting along. It's actually creating a system whereby, through enlightened self-interest, each part can better achieve what it needs to achieve through joining than by separating. So there is an inherent tendency in nature to create synergistic systems. Even though it may look small right now, the trend is a 14 billion year trend.
The moral challenge of the new century is, can we ensure that this green wave lifts all boats? Can we build a green economy that's strong enough to lift people out of poverty? Can we create green pathways, career pathways for urban youth so they can learn how to install solar panels, sell solar panels, design new ones? Can we put green technology learning centers in every public high school and community college so that we're not just talking about business opportunities for rich people in the green economy or consumer choices for affluent people in the green economy, but job opportunities for poor people, wealth building opportunities for poor people, health improving opportunities for poor people. That's the true genius and magic and power of a green economy. At the end of the day, you have to ask the question, what is justice? Where does justice come from? What does justice look like? We are so used to, in our society, having this retributive view of justice, retribution-based justice, revenge-based justice. If somebody's a trespasser, if they've done something wrong, hurt them, add damage to damage. There's another view of justice, a restorative view, not retribution-based, but restoration-based. We would say justice has been done, not when damage has been added to damage, but when healing has occurred, when the wrongdoer has been made whole, when the person who's been trespassed against has been made whole, and when that sense of community has been restored.
Economics and ecology, these two words come from the same root, Greek word ekos. Ekos means home. Ecology is the knowledge and the entirety of home, and economy is the management of home. If you lose home, ecology, what will you have to manage? There's nothing to manage. Therefore, economy should be a subtext of ecology. So this mutual respect of diversity and mutual respects of living differently is a kind of social nonviolence. We have to learn to live with other nations, other cultures, other religions, not in spite of differences, but because of differences. Because our diversity and differences bring us a kind of richness which otherwise will not be. So in the same way, social nonviolence is that you allow thousands of languages and cultures and nations to flourish in their own system. So we don't have to impose one kind of market economy, one kind of religious belief system, one kind of social structure, one kind of consumer items, one kind of architecture. There should be this diversity. So for me, imposition of monoculture on society is social violence.
What is healing and how does healing take place? And how I've come to look at it is this.
Yeah.
If we accept, as most scientists do, that such a thing as evolution exists, then at one time there was no life on this planet. Then at some particular point in time, some group of chemicals decided to wrap a membrane around themselves and become that first living cell. And upon doing that, in order for it to exist, it had to be able to respire, it had to be able to take energy in, it had to let waste products out, it had to be able to reproduce, and so forth. But especially, if that cell membrane was injured, it had to be able to close it. In other words, the very essence of what life is healing. That cell can only continue to exist because somehow, somewhere, the concept of wholeness existed, and all the elements of the cell, in order to live, that cell had to be able to heal. In time when we developed multicellular animals, we had a new concept of wholeness, because now the mouth couldn't just decide, I don't feel like eating anymore, because then the whole organism would die. So that sense of wholeness needed to be there, and it needed to be maintained in order for the animal to live. If a predator comes, it runs away in order to maintain its wholeness. If it sees food, even though it has to climb a difficult tree to get to that food, it does so to maintain wholeness of that individual. That's healing. All of those things are healing, because healing is about maintaining the wholeness of the individual. So healing is something that happens on a continuum. For an individual person, this process of self-healing has to do with discovering who you are, where you are on that continuum, and finding the aspects of yourself that want to move in that direction. That healing is an intentional process, it's a voluntary process. It also has to do with gaining access to that wisdom that knows how to move you toward becoming the person that you really want to be, which is actually the person you already are down deep inside. So healing is not just recovering from being sick, but it's also evolving into what you have the potential of being. I often talk about that. The thing that really fascinated me when I was a very young child was that inside of an acorn is an oak tree. You know, not a rose bush, not a pine tree, not a hummingbird. But you open it up, you don't see it. But it's in there. How is it in there? It's in there as a potential. And according to my way of looking at things, an acorn becomes an oak tree. That's part of a healing process as well. Just as much as when a branch breaks off the oak tree, that it seals up the hole so it doesn't lose its sap. They're both different forms of healing. So it's moving to your potential. So although sometimes we think of healing as being a matter of survival, healing is also a matter of thrival. Thriving is what it's about.
We've known for a long time, it's been fairly self-evident that loving relationships are supportive of emotional well-being, psychological health. But what modern science has been learning in the last 20 or 30 years, and particularly in the last 10, is the overwhelming degree to which good relationships, nurturing relationships, loving relationships, support the physical body. They strengthen the immune system and make us less vulnerable to pathogens, microbes that would do us ill. They strengthen the cardiovascular system. They augment the functioning of the respiratory system. There's so many ways in which loving relationships, we now know, are medically indicated. They're fabulous for our health.
If you go into a rainforest, who's in charge? There is no species that's running the show, and yet all species, plants, animals, fungi, all of them seem to know what they're doing and have a coherent whole that creates value like crazy and recycles everything and is just a wonderfully cooperative system on the whole. Our cultural story comes largely from science, so that the universe is lifeless, it is non-living, it's not dead because it never was alive in this view. Get what you can while you can is kind of the philosophy, existentialism, all these things. It's deep in the culture. So we have this notion that humans will always be at each other's throats, that there will always be scarcity. However, I do think that we're going to get beyond this phase, that we are going to be able to move into the human cooperative mode fully, meaning our economics will be win-win economics. You know, the beauty of the word unsustainable is that it tells us in a single word that this cannot last. We really do have to get over the notion that we can keep doing this.
Whether it's in Watts, where, we see the type of mental, physical, and psychological abuse that we experience in the culture manifest itself in the form of homicide. You go to Beverly Hills, Pacific Palisades, or some of these places, that same mental, physical, and psychological abuse manifests itself in the form of suicide. There's a conversation that's not being had, and we're all being duped into believing that we're so different from each other, that, you know, I got this, you don't have this, or I have this and you don't have that, that it makes us different, and it doesn't.
When we launched Link TV, we didn't set out to create a counter to Fox News. Bill Moyers once said to us, the way to counter propaganda is not with more propaganda from the other side, but is to provide the truth and give viewers the opportunity to make their own choice.
Close the door on the navigator! Oh, shit. What's this? What's this? Oh my God.
Hi everyone, very excited to be here to show you what goes into making a animated sequence for Thrive. I'll take just one scene and just break it down for you. So the first thing I would do is I cut it out from the surroundings to isolate it. I've cut it out here, I've changed the coloring a little bit, I've added the flags, I've added the grand opening sign, here's my garden cafe title, and then the last thing I do is I add this, this texture effect, which kind of gives it a more of a handmade look, almost sort of illustrative. I do this to every single element, photographic element in all of the animation. Then, once I've done that for every single element for the scene, I go into Illustrator, and I create my characters. The reason I do these in Illustrator is because they can scale up forever. They're vector graphic, which means they can be as big or small as they would ever need to be, and they never lose their resolution. So now I'm going to take all of these, all my silhouettes, all of my elements, and bring them into After Effects. I put them all together in one scene. I just lay everything in, get it looking the way I like it, and then I put everything into a 3D space. So, for example, this woman, I want her to be in the foreground. If I were to push her into the background more, she gets smaller. If I pull her close, she gets bigger. This is so that when the camera passes by, she looks like she's in the foreground. She moves faster because she's closer to us. Then I know I'm going to have a butterfly animated in the scene, so in a separate composition, then I bring both the butterfly and the grand opening scene into this huge composition of all of the scenes that are going to be in this animation. This is where I also add the sky, the grass, trees, background elements, and you can see as I scroll past how long and how huge that. This is just everything that's going to be in this animation, so that when I actually start animating the movement, it's all there. Then I bring it into my final comp, and this is where I add my camera, which you can see down here. It shows I'm scrolling past, I'm moving in, I'm moving out. This is the animated final product. So yeah, thanks so much for listening, and I hope this shed a little light on what goes into making these animations, and I've had a great time working on them and can't wait to do more.
Cycles repeating, the earth is speaking, singing time has come. I wake up from this nightmare of life. So many shattered lives reaching out, crying,
Crying out for freedom, crying out for love. Carried by the current, till we stand side by side on the brink of a brand new dawn.
We come together while the waters rise. There's a stirring. What on earth does it take to thrive? While we've been sleeping, our hearts were beating so much closer than we ever knew. Beneath the noise, there is an inner voice whispering, clear and true.
The veils are finally lifting, our ways becoming clear. There's a dream without a limit, and a vision so strong, every person knows they belong.
Come together while the waters rise. There's a stirring deep inside.
Deep inside,
we come together to stand up for our lives. What on earth does it take to thrive out in the open? Thrive healing what's broken.
every heart, every life, living or facing it
We come together while the waters rise. There's a stirring deep inside.
deep inside.
We come together to stand up for our lives. We all have what it takes to thrive. We come together while the waters rise. There's a stirring deep inside. We come together to stand up for our lives. We all have what it takes to thrive. We all have what it takes to thrive. We all have what it takes to thrive.
Thrive. What on earth will it take? Be a part of the conversation. Be a part of the solution.